You are listening to Heating and Eating, a show on energy poverty in Canada by Yasmin and Abi. In Canada, one of the biggest questions I get asked by people who experience energy poverty, by community organizations who work with people that do energy poverty, and by policymakers is that what is the role that my city can play on energy poverty? And in Canada, there is provincial programs, utility programs. Isn't really a federal program, although there might be, and so there's some movement there. But what are cities doing, and what can cities do in ways that maybe other levels of government can't, as things stand today?
I love this question. And just first of all, I would also like your perspective on all of this too. I think I have been thinking about this too, and I don't know if you feel the same, but I think it's only been the last 4 or 5 years that municipalities have really started to think about their role when it comes to energy poverty. At least in our work, we didn't really have these conversations with local government. So I think all local governments are really trying to figure out where do they fit, what's their role. And I think there are a few things happening local government-wise. One of the first ones I think was the town of Bridgewater.
Oh, yeah.
Who won that big prize. I forgot what it was called.
It's like $5 million from it's like some kind of federal government sustainable development, something like that.
$1 million. At the time, it was $1 billion.
Yeah.
But with this amazing North Star goal of eliminating energy poverty in their town. And they really took that and kind of ran with it. And I think that was really one of the first places that I saw local governments getting involved and not leaving it to the utilities or the provinces. And I think, and I'll give you my perspective and would love to kind of get your reaction to it. To me, I think local government has such a key role because local government knows their own communities in a way that utilities and provinces never, and federal governments never could. They know the neighborhoods, they know the community organizations, they know the players, they know their own people and residents. And I think they have the benefit for local governments that is beyond what a utility has, is they have a social mandate. And they're able to do things and spend money on things beyond just efficiency, beyond just GHGs. They have to think about housing and affordability and elders and staying home and heat. They have a holistic mandate. And so I think there's a real opportunity for local governments to fill the gap that's happening. And the gaps look different across the country. Some gaps are bigger than others. But there's an opportunity for local governments to look at what's happening for their residents. Like if I'm a low-income person in Moncton or low-income person in Regina, low-income person in Red Deer, what are the things that I have available to me from the feds, from the province, from my utilities? Taking a scan of that and then figuring out, does that serve what we are trying to do as a local government? Are the goals of those programs in line with our goals? And if not, how can we shift that? And we talked last time a lot about, sort of shallow savings and how that addresses goals of some organizations, but not necessarily for residents. And so that's a piece that I think a local government could really look to fill the gap from a delivery technical point of view. And then the second piece, and then I'll stop and love to hear your thoughts, is around how can a local government make sure that their residents are able to take advantage of these programs? Because there are programs. We're at a point where every Canadian, there is a low-income program available. So if I'm the city of Burnaby or I'm the city of Calgary, how am I making sure that the metro town neighborhood, the people I know can can qualify for these programs. What am I doing to make sure that they take advantage of it, that they are solutioned and incorporated so that I know my residents who pay their taxes, who pay their bills, can participate in the programs that they pay for. I'll stop there and would love to hear kind of where you feel with that, how that resonates.
Fantastic. I've been thinking about this a lot since you and I had a conversation offline about this, and I agree with everything you said. There's this common saying. I'm butchering the timelines here a little bit, but they say like if the federal government stopped working, it might take you like a month to notice, and if like the provincial government like stopped working, it may take you a week. But if
Mm,
your local government stopped working, you will notice tomorrow.
you
Like your,
notice.
your garbage doesn't get picked up. Like your water, mains. Yeah,
Your playgrounds, yeah.
your playgrounds are dirty, or your traffic is blocked off. There's like so many things. Like impact of the local government in our daily lives is
Mm-hmm.
largely unseen, and so but it underpins like our social life, civic life, and economic activity. And a lot of people don't realize. I mean, we just saw now in Calgary what happens when when local infrastructure experiences a once in a 100 year or something catastrophe, right? And so like life is upturned. So I think I agree with you. I think local governments are unique in that way, in that they are the government that is closest to the people who are experiencing the problem. And I think that at the local level, because typically the people who work in municipalities tend to also live in or near in that municipality, they have a lot more, I think, tacit knowledge about the community in ways that it doesn't show up in data. And so if you're a province or a utility and you're running these stat scan numbers across, okay, where is the lowest income households and neighborhoods, and you're trying to design programs, that gets you far. But there's always that last mile problem, like people who don't show up in data, people who need a little bit of more additional hand holding, and stuff like that. That I think local governments, because of their kind of deep rooted knowledge about a smaller community, I think they have a little bit more insight into the tacit knowledge of how energy poverty shows up behind closed doors. And I think local government is perhaps a little bit more approachable for the common person. Like I've delegated in cities that I have lived in, and like at that time I was just a graduate student at the university, right? I just, I was able to go and offer input, and it was reasonably well received, and I'm grateful for being given the opportunity to do so. Me as a normal person don't have that level of access at higher levels of government. And so I think in terms of so I think that's where municipalities, and I agree with your point too. While provincial governments, through history of what we talked about last time we did this, are locked into delivering shallow energy savings or greenhouse gas emission savings and things like that. I think local governments have the ability to kind of layer on top of that and think a little bit more about like social dynamics and community cohesion. I know municipalities have a lot of programs about belonging and aging in place, and welcoming newcomers and things like that. And so there's ways in which I think that social aspect that is largely missing, in my view, from utility level programs. I think local governments are uniquely positioned to kind of layer that on. And then my question then is, why doesn't that happen a lot more often? Because looking from the outside, I must confess I've never worked for a city,
Yeah.
uh, uh, and yeah, and the people that we have worked with at cities are all people. There's a lot of people who care about this stuff, who are trying to be more knowledgeable and try care about their communities, and yet somehow poverty doesn't really show up prominently in a lot of municipal climate action plans or housing plans. So let's just speculate. What do you think? Why do you think that is?
Why?
Yeah.
I think it's just historically not been something municipalities and local governments have thought about. I
Mm.
think like energy is something like that's for the utility, that's for the province. Affordability, that's for the province. Like it hasn't been a core focus of a municipality until the last four, I think, for the last 4 or 5 years. And even now, it's just really like I think municipalities are trying to figure out how to include it and embed it in their space. And I think it's easy to push it
Hmm.
off the plate. And it is hard to think about, okay, we've got these climate goals. How do we make sure we're also addressing affordability? How do we make sure we're also addressing equity? Like, they're not easy problems to solve, as we both know.
Yeah.
And when your climate is hard in and of itself.
Yeah.
So it's, what do you think? Why?
I agree with you. And I think the answer is, I mean, at this point in time, the answer is quite banal in
Hmm,
that I'm trying to think of what a job description or a work plan for someone who's responsible for
yeah,
thinking about energy poverty would look like. And it's hard because what department do they sit in, right? Are
yeah,
they in like social, social development, economic development? Are they in like health and housing, or
climate.
are they in like climate? Are they in, unless you get, I mean, if you're like Bridgewater and you get some bespoke funding to focus
Yeah,
on something like this, then you can hire a team of smart people who can do this sort of thing. But I think it's very banal in that sense that like as municipalities now are stepping up into the role of like thinking about climate and making all these climate commitments, I think downstream from that, we're now seeing, I think what's happened in the last 4 or 5 years is there's been an increased focus on leaving no one behind and making sure that the efforts are more evenly distributed and more Canadians get to participate in the future that we want to create. And I think increasingly we're starting to see, I feel very encouraged by a lot of climate professionals, municipal professionals who work within these institutions who are actually taking a personal proactive interest
yeah,
in trying to learn about energy poverty, trying to figure out ways of embedding that within climate plans and action plans
yeah.
and stuff that they take. So I find all of that very encouraging. And so I thought maybe we could talk about maybe do unofficial shout outs to some of the good ones out there who are trying their best and
The
leading the
award.
pack. Yeah, the Heating and Eating Show Awards. And in doing so, maybe we could come up with like just like a couple of baskets of ideas. Because I think if for people who are listening to this, my call to action, I think, and I don't know if you will agree with me on this, is that my call to action is that the project of energy poverty is hard and incredibly challenging for any level of government to solve on its own. But there's little things that municipalities can do consistently to improve lives in the context of what they're already doing. I think any of the things that we're going to talk about now, I think, are quite within the reach of many of our well-resourced municipalities in Canada. And so I'm hoping that by giving these awards and these shout outs, we might encourage folks out there to give some of these things a try. Okay, so first, I think a big shout out to CUSP, Canada Urban Sustainability Practitioners Network, because back in this must have been 2018, 5 years ago,
And the
uh,
before.
in the before times, yeah, they were one of the first organization institutions to actually really put energy poverty on the map, literally. And it began with working with Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and then really trying to empower municipalities to take action on energy poverty in the context of climate plans, which is how like the first energy poverty data map and everything got started. So the origins of think like that in the on the larger side case. I know there's folks like Mariam who've done the research and stuff. Like there's
Hmm.
other folks there, but really putting it literally on the map. So huge shout out to CUP. So I think one thing municipalities can do really is to take a quantitative and qualitative data approach just to map their communities out to try to understand where pockets of vulnerability, not just like, oh, who's spending more on energy bills. We can go down the weeds on trying to get data from utilities and stuff like that. There's a lot of municipalities that are doing that, but taking a quantitative and qualitative role, like where are people that need supports the most, and how can we use energy efficiency as a tool to help improve outcomes, and just mapping that community asset mapping or community, like resource mapping and just like vulnerability mapping, I think is within reach of, or social vulnerability mapping, I think is within reach of a lot of municipalities.
I totally agree. I think like that, the cusp map created this place where folks, including myself, started to look at the data, started to pull out some of the insights about who this is impacting, disproportionately impacting, and allowed us to put quantitative data against what we were seeing on the ground and in homes. And I think CUSP did a real like such a service to the future of Canada
Hmm.
to get us all started 100%. Um, I think. Oh wait, can we move to the next one, or do you want
Yeah,
to?
yeah,
So, City of New Westminster
yeah.
in British Columbia. I think what they have done is what I would do if I had my magic wand and I was, mayor of the city of whatever. Is really take a hard look at what programs are available to their residents and put in pretty, uncomplicated support to their communities to help support them to take advantage. So, like making sure that concierge and community outreach is happening in their neighborhoods that they know will be able to access. And here in BC, it was called the Clean BC IQP. Now it's the Energy Savings Program. We also have ECAP and the energy savings kits. So putting in these concierge services, this outreach services that make sure that their residents can access all three of those, and including heat
Bylaws,
access to cooling. Yes.
access to cooling, right on.
So the cost of that, cost of outreach compared to the cost of standing up three programs, right? It's like a minimal cost that allows their residents to benefit
Mm.
from these programs. And I think it they did the due diligence of understanding those programs, understanding what the challenges were, what the barriers were, and thinking about ways that they can fill those gaps.
Fantastic. So we've started at the West Coast. Let's just move across the country, ending all the way to the East Coast. And this is a we have to say this is a non-exhaustive
Oh,
list.
and
We're,
also, I was not prepared for this.
yeah,
So.
neither was I. Sometimes these ideas pop into our heads and then we roll with it, right, on this heating and eating show. So, yeah, we're just giving shout outs, and it's chances are we miss a couple of people. And like everyone who's doing the good work out there, salute to you. Keep doing the good work. But I think so moving towards the prairies, I think City of Calgary
Yes.
and City of Edmonton. City of Calgary in particular, with I think they might be end up being the first city in Canada to have like a dedicated energy poverty strategy.
Think yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think they are the only, although please somebody correct me,
yeah,
municipality to actually do a community outreach full strategy for the city to understand energy poverty. And
I
it's
agree.
like,
And what we've seen in other municipalities usually is that like some kind of there will be if they do three outreach efforts in the part of their climate plan, they'll have one session on like low income housing or something like that. But my from my outsider's perspective, looking in, City of Calgary looks like they're playing a leadership role and just really having a high level strategy on just energy poverty alone. Full consultations, like a literature review, coming up with a data mapping strategy, working with utilities to get the data, defining energy poverty at the Calgary level, and like just starting from the ground up. And it's a lot of leadership there, and it's hard to do. It's hard to be a leader on some of these things sometimes. You don't want to be the tall poppy and stuff like that. So salute to City of Calgary and then also City of Edmonton for like the home upgrades program and all those.
Calgary too with the home
Yep.
upgrade program. And I think City of Edmonton, they have reduction of energy poverty as one of their key goals as
Mhm.
part of it. They have really a North Star on that. And there is a number of municipalities in Alberta who are also thinking about that, which is really, I have like, interesting that in a province that has a bit of a vacuum when it comes to provincial policy and utilities in Alberta are unable to do DSM.
Yep.
I find it really interesting that the towns are stepping up, cities are stepping up, and it's
Absolutely.
amazing.
And
Yeah,
filling in the gaps, just like you were
filling
saying,
in the
right?
gaps. Right.
Yeah. And then moving to Ontario, just off the top of my head, County of Wellington, which
Mm.
I think they're doing similar to what you mentioned, I think energy concierge program specifically for low income households and meeting people where they're at. I think the program is just launched, and so they have some early kind of. I learned about it at a conference, some early insights on what's working, what's not working, issues of trust and language barriers, trying to navigate all of that. And for a county, which is large rather than a municipality. I think I mean, I haven't really seen other counties like step up in similar fashion across Canada. So I think shout out to County of Wellington. City of Ottawa
Yeah.
might have been the first city and municipality in Canada to have some kind of like a affordability covenant in their low income energy efficiency loan for
Oh,
landlords. So,
mhm.
as you know, this may be a whole entire episode in the future, but renters are increasingly either one of the fastest growing demographics in Canada. A lot of new, low income households, I think 2 and 3 low income households in Canada are renters and vice versa. And so renters are disadvantaged in many ways and typically excluded from programs. So my understanding is the city of Ottawa has like I think it's called a Better Homes Ottawa program that lends low interest loans to homeowners who want to make energy efficiency upgrades, but they expanded that to include landlords with the understanding that like landlords will not pass the cost down or won't increase the rent for tenants in exchange for taking this low interest loan and upgrading the properties. It's a win-win-win for the city, for the landlord, for the tenant, and that's a great example.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump back because I think that is also a really critical role that a city can play that potentially no other body can play when it comes to renters and
Mm-hmm.
landlords. And yeah, we probably should have a whole show on sort of the tensions between that. But all is to say, like, we can upgrade homes till morning come, but we don't want to put renters at risk to that rent to increase or for them to get rent evicted. Cities play a really unique place where they can hold that risk in a way that others can't.
Yeah.
Program delivery agents can't, charities probably can't, provinces can't or don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a role for the city to put those covenants in place and take on that risk. Yeah, that's awesome to hear about Ottawa. Didn't know some of those details.
And then if I could take a quick detour south into across the border, is I mean this is not Canadian example, but something that I think is a really interesting example is Ann Arbor in Michigan. They have a program called Aging Efficiently in Place, which is a combination. They like you were saying, bringing that social element into energy efficiency programming. So they're taking funding from like a utility low income programs and federal funding for this and like healthcare funding for this, and they've put together this package for seniors, low income seniors, where if you're a low income senior, you will get an energy advisor who can do help you plan energy upgrades, a physiotherapist and a personal support worker, so that you're also upgrading like quality of life stuff alongside making energy efficient. So all these three experts will sit with you and give you advice on what you need to do to bring your home to a place where you can age efficiently and gracefully in the place you call home. I think that is such a unique example of what municipalities in Canada could also be doing is kind of
Yeah.
putting packages like this together.
I think that aging in place and the connection to efficiency retrofits is an area that I haven't seen explored too much
Mm-hmm.
in the conversation. And I think there's a bit of a tension there of like seniors who maybe they own an asset that's worth a lot of money. Should should we should they qualify for a low income program where we're spending 15, 20, $30,000 to upgrade their home when some might argue they can sell that asset and move to a different place. And I think that conversation is really worth exploring because there are certainly a lot of benefits from making that home so that senior can stay in place. And I don't think it's a simple conversation, but there's an aspect of aging in place and efficiency and retrofits that is yeah, it's an interesting conversation to have. And how do you design programs
I,
around it?
I think we've come up with like three new future
Yeah.
episodes topics right now, just on part of the show. That is a really interesting conversation because the tension there, I think you're identifying, Yasmin, is that like maybe seniors can move out and make room for younger families in that home. And then seniors can move to a home that's more appropriate to their needs, closer to their amenities, and for more purpose-built homes. And what is the role in policy in helping facilitate all of that? And I'm very open to those conversations, and it's really interesting to think about. And obviously, like with everything else, it's not easy. There is no straight answer because this is people have who've spent their lifetime in a community building thick social ties. It's hard for people to move, and we've seen like research and my in my
Mhm.
day job at Efficiency Canada, we've published research on how the uniquely like seniors face challenges in acquiring credit to pay for energy efficiency upgrades, even if they own their home, and struggle with finding purpose-built rentals, less likely to move for homes. There's all these dynamics at play, and even if we did upgrade the home while a senior is living in and have the equity, it might help the next generation who does move in because
We're still going to get those GHG reductions. We're still going to hit those targets. And it's
yeah,
a good example of how there's a social dynamic
there,
to this.
yeah. Exactly. And then just again, quickly rounding up, just we already talked about Bridgewater, but I think I also know in the Atlantic provinces, province of PEI, I'm sorry, friends in PEI, but I'm blanking on the name of the municipality. But there's also like a neighborhood program that Clean Foundation is running with Efficiency PEI, the support of Office of Net Zero. That's again focused on similar like concierge level services. Same in Victoria Island too. Sorry, I moved all the way back to the West
Yeah,
Coast.
flying back and
Yeah,
forth.
back
Yeah.
and forth, coast to coast to coast. And all long and short of this is to say that there are things that municipalities are already doing in Canada. Most of them fall into a couple of different buckets like data, strategy, concierge service. We build an example from the US. What I genuinely am excited about municipalities stepping in is that this is a great opportunity for experimentation. 'Cause that's what is lacking in the higher levels of government. Is that I mean we've done and should do an entire episode on this, but
Like I was going to say,
yeah,
like,
is that how do we know what's working? We programs are very narrowly scoped at the provincial level, at the federal level, very tightly scoped. A lot of it is black box, like what are the participation numbers and like dollar, and it's hard to know the effectiveness of these programs, not just in terms of kilowatt hours, but like long-term impacts on health and housing and all of the social effects. There isn't a lot of room for experimentation within some of these institutional contexts. So what excites me a lot is that if all the hundreds of municipalities across the country are trying different things, even if they fall into similar buckets, just in these examples we've seen each municipality trying to take its own approach, and then people like us who are researchers and program developers and experts in the space, we can learn from what's happening across the country and try to then use that to improve programs at even higher orders of government.
I totally agree. This is going to be our next episode because I think like the way programs have rolled out across our country from federal governments, provincial governments, utilities, of course they are very risk averse. And what that creates is an environment where it's very hard to be creative. It's very hard to be innovative. It's very hard to have any potential of failure. And that creates a space where you can't innovate. You can't try something new because there may be a risk of failure. And it's understandable from the province and you like definitely understandable, but that is not how we're going to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
We need creativity. We need to have the space to fail. We need to have the space to share learnings. Like I know how Cambo's programs are doing our drop off rate, our average savings per home, our average dollar amount, and we're happy to share it. But there's not how do we know? How do I know how my program and Cambo's programs are compared to others?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to break open that fear of sharing some of this data because that's how we all get better at this. And I agree with you that I think municipalities, because there's so many of them across Canada, it creates this opportunity to be able to share and say, okay, we tried this, so don't try this. And this really worked for us. Maybe like try this qualification criteria and this is the form we used. And, I think there's such an opportunity to create really impactful programs by sharing and being open and transparent.
Absolutely. And I think this is where other orders of government or institutions or even private foundations can play is convening,
Mm,
people who are doing this work together so that we can learn from each other. And so while we're on that topic, quick shout out to, we're doing Efficiency Canada is in my day job at Efficiency Canada. we've partnered with an organization to host Canada's first energy poverty conference, Home Energy Justice Conference. One of the things I would love to see, just looking at the agenda, is an opportunity for us to have these discussions and conversations, bring people from different silos, right, at the municipal level, provincial level, national level, across the provinces, across this big and beautiful country, bring them all in one place, and then just try to learn from each other and what we're doing, what's working and what's not working. And then institutions like Efficiency Canada, I mean, we are developing tools, and we have I know CUSP did the energy poverty data mapping in 2016. We had the latest data 2021. It's available on Efficiency Canada's website. Put together research on like qualitative experiences of energy poverty. So there's a lot of tools out there for
Yeah.
municipalities. And then of course, Yasmin, your organization Campo has done a lot of work on like measuring non-energy impacts, and like how do you do outreach for communities? How do we make like financing more equitable? There's I mean, just between the two of our organizations in our day jobs, we are here in a personal capacity, but in our day job organizations, there's resources out there, and there's other organizations doing good work
There's
too.
lots of, yeah, I was just going to say, lots of really impactful people and experts across the country that
So
understand.
the groundwork is set. And so now it's time for municipalities to step up, take charge, and elevate how energy poverty is done, and experiment and innovate, and help Canada get to a better place in the future. And that's what I'm excited about.
I love it. That's a great call to action. Great way to end.